If we're trying to gauge what will Israel's retaliation against Iran look like, how will it take revenge for Tuesday's salvo of 180 ballistic missiles soaring in from Iran, forcing many Israelis to flee to underground bunkers? It's first worth establishing that it seems Israel will attack back.
Iran made a big mistake tonight, and it will pay for it.
Let me be very clear. We will defend our people. We will act.
We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do. They have a right to respond.
Israel's security cabinet convened the same day of the Iranian attack to discuss its options. And according to Axios reporting, that meeting ended with the understanding that there will be an Israeli military response, but without a clear decision on what that response will be. So what might it be? A strike on Iran's nuclear program is a possibility. Israel already has nuclear weapons. Iran is on the verge of getting them. It's what's known as a threshold state, which means they're close. The world's nuclear watchdog says Iran has enriched uranium to about 60% purity. Just for context, 4 to 5% is what you need as fuel for a nuclear reactor. 90% is what you need for a weapon. And according to this US threat assessment of Iranian nuclear capability in 2024, Iran has greatly expanded its nuclear program and has undertaken activities that better position it to produce a nuclear device if it chooses to do so.
Israel sees Iran's nuclear program as leading to possible and perhaps even probable weaponization. And Israel believes that a nuclear Iran would truly be an existential threat to the country.
A nuclear Iran would reshape the strategic balance in the Middle East.
Since Iran's ballistic missile strike on Israel, former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has explicitly called for a strike on Iran's nuclear program. We must act now to destroy Iran's nuclear program. We must remove this terrible threat to our children's future. We have the justification, we have the tools. This opportunity must not be missed.
They would say that's it, the war with Iran over its nuclear weapons, an effort to knock the project back 10 years, 15 years. This is the moment. If you were ever going to do it, this is the moment.
But there are clear reasons for Israel not to do this. For one, it's a hard target to hit.
The nuclear program targets are better guarded, much harder to hit, in part because Iran has been anticipating U.S. or Israeli military action for many years.
Iran's Natanz uranium enrichment facility is a key piece of its nuclear program. Much of it is underground. But just to its south, reports of a nuclear facility being tunneled deep into the Zagros Mountains, a facility that the Associated Press says is so deep underground that U.S. airstrikes likely couldn't reach it. And worth pointing out here, the Americans don't seem to have any interest at all in reaching it.
Would you support an attack on Iran's nuclear sites by Israel?
The answer is no.
The U.S. has actively tried to dissuade Israel from attacking nuclear sites in Iran.
It's a real Pandora's box when it comes to this nuclear option.
And there is indeed the risk that attacking a nuclear site would be seen as an extreme reaction to an attack that, by Israel's own admission, did very little damage.
This missile attack didn't achieve anything militarily at all.
If the war spread into Lebanon, as it has, and to involve Iran and Israel directly against each other, as it has, if that really continued in a downward spiral, the United States would get dragged in, and that the whole project of maintaining security and stability in the Middle East, which is the American goal, would be tragically damaged, and the United States wants to avoid this.
Not to mention, as some experts have suggested, the possibility that any attack on Iran's nuclear capabilities simply drives it to develop those capabilities even further. So if Israel opts not to attack Iran's nuclear facilities, what else might it hit?
Oil infrastructure.
Oil installations.
Oil infrastructure.
We're in discussion with that.
Yes, oil is a big deal for Iran. It's the world's 7th largest oil producer. It's the economic heartbeat of the country. It's also an easier target. This is a map of some of the key oil refineries and terminals in Iran. Not pictured are the dozens of oil fields that could be potential strike targets as well as the thousands of kilometers of oil pipeline that crisscross the country. But this too would likely be seen as an escalation against an attack that Israel says, as I mentioned before, didn't do much damage.
Because it would lead to a spike in oil prices, this would anger many countries around the world that have nothing to do with this conflict one way or another.
And this isn't just speculative. When Iran launched ballistic missiles at Israel this past Tuesday, oil markets reacted almost immediately. They shot up. The world uncertain what an escalating war would do to supply. They shot up again with news that Biden was open to discussing Iranian oil as a potential target. And analysts worry the price could spike up another 5%, even 10%, if Iran's ability to export oil were hit directly. That becomes a global issue. There's also the question of just how expansive an Israeli strike would have to be to meaningfully cripple Iran's most important industry.
It's absolutely critical. I mean, we're talking about the livelihoods of Iran's economy.
So certainly Israel could disrupt certain parts of it, but the oil infrastructure is quite big.
The cost is high because the U.S. would be very upset, the Iranians would be very upset, and it wouldn't accomplish very much.
So this leaves only a couple of alternatives, both of which are a part of Israel's established playbook. It could try to carry out targeted assassinations, clandestine operations similar to the one that killed Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran 2 months ago, or just a week ago when Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated in Beirut. Iran knows this could happen to them too. According to Reuters reporting, Iran's supreme leader was taken to a secure location inside Iran a day after Hassan Nasrallah was killed. He stayed there for days, and only in the last day or so made a public appearance.
Israel has been conducting an assassination campaign in Iran, primarily against Iranian nuclear and weapons scientists. So Israel could go after regime targets. These would include leaders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, leaders of Iran's military and intelligence services.
But among the experts we spoke to, this isn't, in their minds, the likeliest course of action for Israel. They think we may see something like what we saw last April, a limited strike against military targets.
We're talking about precision hits on Iranian infrastructure that's critical to their military capabilities. They might, for example, target missile production facilities, or you could see strikes on key military bases, especially those housing drone operations, command centers for the Revolutionary Guard.
When Iran last attacked Israel directly in April with nearly 300 drones, rockets, and missiles, Israel was urged at the time to act with restraint. The Iron Dome defense was largely successful, and you might recall Joe Biden urging Benjamin Netanyahu to take the win. Netanyahu seemed to take that advice. Less than a week later, Israel retaliated, but only hitting an Air Force base, destroying part of an air defense battery. This was as symbolic as retaliation gets, and it ended the exchange of direct attacks between the two countries. Many experts believe Israel may pursue something more severe this time, but similar.
Because of pressure from the United States to limit escalation, but also because a lot is going to depend on Israeli capabilities and where Iran has successfully improved its defenses.
Between Washington's pressure and an understanding of its own limitations and how stretched Israel already is, that the Israelis will decide not to hit nuclear targets in a meaningful way and will probably avoid oil refineries.
But let's make one thing clear. It is currently unknown whether any of the options we've talked about are truly on or off the table. This ongoing conflict in the Middle East has been an unending crossing of red lines that many of us didn't think would be crossed. And so the unanswerable question that dictates the next stage of this war, when Israel retaliates, will it take vengeance for the results of Iran's most recent attack or the intention?